Peace, everyone. Today I want to go over one of the most controversial verses in the Quran and my current understanding of it, and that's verse 434. Specifically, I want to go over this portion right here. And I'm going to read it. I seek refuge in God for saying the rejected. If you fear rebellion from the women, you shall enlighten them. Then you may stay away from them in bed. Then you may shun them completely. Now, for centuries, this portion right here was translated as to strike or to hit a woman. And the word, if I can find it with my weak Arabic knowledge, is right here. Actually, it's this whole thing, وَأُضْرُبْ بُهُنَّ, which could mean to strike. And up until, or most of my life actually, I thought that meant to strike in the context of this verse, which I'm sort of ashamed of now, having read the whole Quran and understanding the equality of women according to God with men, and still thinking that God would send this down to say that you may strike women, even if it's in this given situation, okay, which has a couple steps before you even get there. But even with that said, let's examine that word and what it may mean. If you go to the Quran corpus, you can look up the root. So for anybody who doesn't know Arabic well, like myself, you can always go to Quran corpus. You can pick out the word. So in this case, the word is right here. You can see the translation. You can look at the root of the word, and then you can go to a site called Project Root List. That's just one example. There are other books and things you could look this up in, and you'll look up these three letters, DRB. Okay, so let's go to Project Root List, and I've already pulled this up. I clicked the Dad letter up here, and I can see some possible translations, and you see a lot, but generally the top translations are the most common. So you could see to heal, strike, propound as an example, put forth as a parable, go, make a journey, travel, mix, avoid, etc. And you can also see in Quran corpus all the uses of that root word and the different verses they're used in and how they're translated. And you can see there's struck, there's set forth, there's cast, there's travel, and so forth, present. So the root of this word does not necessarily always mean to strike. And I think part of the reason for that translation lasting so long is that culture of men hold a higher place than women, which was especially true so many centuries ago, but even in America up until a few decades ago, when you had TV stars and the like on television talking about how they kind of will hit a woman sometimes if she deserves it. And it was such a casual thing even just a few decades ago to talk about. And I think this mindset is why so many people for so long kind of just accepted this translation and let it go. And it wasn't until maybe a year or two ago where somebody presented this to us in the mosque, and I'm starting to see it more and more as well in online Quran-only communities and so forth, also making the argument that this word, udrib, is not necessarily strike, and in this verse is definitely not to strike, but rather, as we see in PRL, it's more likely to avoid. Or you could even some people could even put the argument that it's like to set forward an example or a set of final, what's the word, kind of conditions maybe upon the marriage before the marriage breaks up. I would think that's also an example, but maybe someone can enlighten me there. But I think avoid is the most likely translation here. So if you fear rebellion from the women, you enlighten them, you stay away from them in bed, and then you can avoid them completely. So let me know your thoughts on this, and the evidence in the Quran as to how you see this. I did want to present some of those verses with the English translation, just so you guys can see that that word is translated differently across the Quran. So in this verse, we're talking to Job, and God is telling him, فَأُضْرِبْ, to travel the land and preach the message. And prior to that, and here's an example of strike. When Moses was told, Udrib, strike the sea with your staff, that would be one example where strike is the correct translation, obviously. And one of the most often examples we see in the Quran is when God puts forth an example for us. He says, وَأُضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا, so present to them an example. That same word, which here is translated as cite for them or present to them, udrib, for them, an example, and then he may give an example here of, in this case, the water sent down from the sky, and so forth. So there's actually a good number, maybe even most, and you can do the count here. There's a good number of strike, there's a good number of set forth, that is not translated as to hit or to strike. So I just wanted to present that. I hope that we will be more respectful of God's word and not let cultural surroundings and biases decide what the translation would be, but rather we can look to things like God's examples of men and women being equal as evidence for a translation, a correct translation, God willing. Peace.